Whew. Thank you so much, Allie, for the introduction. Hey, family, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Tarek. It is an absolute pleasure to join you this evening. And to give some context to the topic, Allie had asked me to text him a possible topic, and I texted 3 topics, and I sat with it. And my heart was drawn to this one. So I want to read this quick paragraph out of the 12 and 12 on page 102. Now, what of prayer? Prayer is the raising of the heart and mind to God. And this includes meditation. How may we go about it? And how does it fit in with meditation? Prayer, as commonly understood, is a petition to God. Having opened our channel as best we can, we try to ask for these right things of which we and others are in the greatest need. And we think that the whole range of our needs is well defined by the part of step 11, which says knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. A request for this fits any part of our day. I always get a little bit nervous when my sponsor joins us or is present when I give a pitch about anything that has to do with our wonderful program that's outlined in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I'm double hit this evening because my girl's on here as well, and she doesn't usually, she listens to me at home all the time. So this is going to be fun tonight. Ralph a while back asked a question in our sponsorship family meeting, and the question was, what step do you hang your hat on? And without much hesitation, as much as I love carrying the message to those that are still suffering from our illness, steps 10 and 11. Now tonight's topic, raising the heart and mind to God, is connected to step 11, but it's all virtually impossible for me to share experience about step 11 without somehow unconsciously weaving in step 10, because step 10 has a component of prayer in it as well. All of our steps do. If you asked me to be your speaker over 6.5 years ago, you would have got a lot of methodology, technique, and some experience. But one of the things my current sponsor has taught me is we are a storytelling society. Nobody on this call is ever really going to meet God, as far as I know God, know what he looks like or she looks like. But we know God and we hear God, not only through our own spiritual practices, but through the stories that other people tell. And so tonight, I'm going to share my experience with raising my heart to God through certain events that have transpired over my time here that come into my awareness this evening. Little sidebar, my home group is the Over the Bridge group in Birmingham, Alabama. We meet on Tuesday nights. If you're ever in Birmingham, please join us. We meet at 6:30, and if you have kids, please bring them because we offer childcare. That's an amazing group that I'm a part of, and we're big book enthusiasts. And the 10th and 11th step are a big part of our group. But I remember after being incarcerated, and up to that point in my life, I'd had a mother. I grew up in a Muslim home. But my father was an abusive drunk. My mother was trying to support the family. So she was devoted to building a career. So I was raised by my grandmother, who was a very religious and spiritual woman. My parents never forced me to have any views, never forced me to go to them. I went to Bible study. They were very open-minded individuals who had come to this country to build a new life, but they were so distracted by their own lives that they left it to my grandmother to raise the kids. And I remember it didn't matter what circumstances were taking place in the life, I had a very difficult set of circumstances with an alcoholic home. And, neurotic out of my mother, and my brother and I in positions where we had to defend my mother physically and ourselves. And I would always look at my grandmother, and she would have these prayer beads, and she would be praying that God is Like, she was such a woman of faith that whatever was unfolding in her eyes, in her heart, in her mind was the God. Didn't matter what circumstances were. Now, I remember witnessing that as a child, witnessing that as an adolescent and a teenager. But as soon as my relationship with alcohol began, and then all the other mind-altering substances they throw on top of that, that became a distant memory that went into remission and was buried deep within my unconscious mind. And I didn't have access to it anymore. And it wasn't until after I got sober that I began to have the memories of my grandmother. So I was incarcerated and I was looking at prison time, and they let me out. I had to do 90 days in an inpatient treatment center. But throughout, my court case was continued. And being a very meticulous, organized, can feed into my controlling attribute that I have. I documented my progress. And so every time I passed alcohol or a drug screen, I wanted a copy of it. I had been kicked out of graduate school years before. So I got back into school. I got back into the workforce. I got one job. And then I started working at this facility that I was a patient at one point. And I documented all of it. I ended up getting my own studio apartment. And I remember my court case was being continued for another time. But this time, my attorney was meeting with the district attorney that was on the case, the assistant district attorney. And this was on the morning of August 5th, 2008. Now, a power greater than myself separated me from alcohol and all the other substances that I was struggling with on the morning of November 5th in 2007. And so since that date, I have found it unnecessary to take a drink or use any type of mood-altering substance to address any level of psychological pain that I am experiencing, or deal with the emotions and feelings associated with any type of traumatic event going on in my life or difficult event. And on the morning of August 5th in 2008, I get a phone call from my attorney, and I pick up the phone call. I'm sitting in this little studio apartment right down the street from this treatment center because I didn't want to venture too far because I had commitments there. And my attorney's name was Travis. Travis says, "Tarek, I do not understand what just happened. Somebody upstairs truly loves you. They have dropped all the charges." Now, I had a drug trafficking Schedule A felony, and I had an intent to distribute Schedule A felony. And the charges were dropped. I didn't have any probation, no community service. When I went to make amends to people that were in that game with me, several of them refused to see me because they thought I was working for the police, because nobody understood what had happened. And so you can't go out into the world, in that world, and tell everybody that God did for you what you couldn't do for yourself. That just doesn't work in that world. And so many of them never respond to my approaches to make those amends. And so I remember my studio apartment, and I can see it like it's happening right now. All that's jumping out at me are these words from this book, and I swear the ink in my big book is still wet sometimes. And it said, "We hope after reading these pages, no further authentication will be necessary." And I made a commitment to my Creator that I was going to live the way of life described in our big book from that moment until whenever I transition out of this body. And the heart and the mind raised to God that commitment. The spiritual foundation of life, this work that we do in these 12 steps and within our beautiful fellowship, I protected at all costs. I love that, in my participation in the program, a major contributor to why my marriage fell apart, I refused to not participate. I'm the one that has to live with what happens if I pick up a drink. Everybody else in my life can eventually make a decision and walk away. but I'm the one that becomes the tornado, roaring through the lives of the people that I love, destroying relationships, lying to people. I'm the one that has to live with that. Now, I've learned over the years how to integrate all these areas of my life, because the AA way of life is my life. You know, Ralph, he said many things over the years that imprint into my psyche at a very deep level, to the point when I hear it for the first time, it is registered and I'll never forget it. But he said, Tarek, don't let the life AA gave you get in the way of your AA life. And that's something that I will protect. I protect the work. Now I've been blessed to be in a relationship with an amazing woman who's also in the program, who's been trudging this path for 10 years, and she participates on her path, and we get to share that with one another, and that has been one of the blessings that we've received here in the recent past. And so in order for me to continue telling these stories, my hope and aspiration for this talk is that they always reflect the spiritual aspect of the program. And not too long ago, I heard a guy say this that I sponsor about the, like, you know, step 7 has to do with the spiritual side of the program. And I'm not aware, I don't know if anybody else on the call is aware, is there any other side to the program? The entire program is spiritual in nature. All of it is. And the interesting thing with the topic tonight, step 11, the prayer and the, you know, seeking, you know, sought through these practices and these disciplines to improve our awareness of that relationship. That is at the core every step along the way. It bleeds into every step. And I have to tell so my late grand sponsor, may he rest in peace, this gentleman named Mark Houston, he used to talk about our tombstone. And on our tombstone, it was going to have our birth date, it's going to have a dash, and then it's going to have our expiration date. And he'd always ask, what are you doing with your dash? What are you doing with your dash? And for me, I have another dash. November 5th, 2007. I was raised from the scrap heap, delivered to a level of life that I had never known. Something in me died on November 5th, 2007, and something was born at exactly the same time. And I have another dash in, I would say, June of 2009. When I was catapulted out of my first pass through the steps, I made a lot of amends, but somewhere around the 7 or 8 month mark, I stopped making amends. And I was I was full of the relief that's in the program. Relief is available to all of us, but I'd never taken the time to contemplate a difference between relief and freedom. And I stopped. I was doing very little. My prayers were a bookmark that I had. It was from a group of New Jersey, and it had the St. Francis prayer on one side and had the evening review questions from page 87 on the other side. And so that's what I would do every morning and every night. But the thought never occurred to me that I needed to be communicating with this higher power as I walked through my day. And so there was these brief moments in the morning and in the evening where I was expressing a desire to connect, but there was nothing happening in the middle of the day. There was no meditation occurring at this point, but I was sponsoring a ton of guys. But my personal relationship was full of judgment. I couldn't my emotional nature, especially around my parents, because I'd moved back in their basement. My sponsor thought at the time it would be a good idea for me to move back into the basement with my parents so I could continue to make financial amends. And I did that for a few months, but again, I started to think it was my money that I was giving back. I totally forgot it was their money I was giving back to them. And so I'm sitting in this basement. I can't control my emotional nature. Sometimes I get miserable, sometimes I get depressed, but I can't sit still. I don't enjoy solitude. If I am at home, I've got my computer out, I've got music in the background, and I'm calling one of you to see what you're doing tonight in the fellowship, because I cannot be by myself. I'm not truly happy at this point in my life, and I'm afraid that I've missed the boat on something. And that spring in my chest is starting to tighten. And it gets tight, and it gets tighter, and it's demanding relief. So I would say about 6 months before this, I'm at a meeting in Atlanta, AA Clubhouse. And at this specific meeting, there's a gentleman who leaves the meeting about 5 minutes before it ends, and he goes and stands outside. And so as you leave, he hands me these 2 CDs, and this was around, I would say, about a year. I was 9 months. I hadn't come up on my anniversary, and like any good, self-absorbed, selfish alcoholic, I'm going to take the CDs this evening, and I'm going to put them in my car door, and I'm not going to listen to them. So we fast forward to the basement, and I'm uneasy, I'm easily annoyed, and I'm not satisfied with my life at this point. But I'm sponsoring 6 or 7 guys. I have H&I commitments. Carry a big book study to a treatment center. What are you talking about? Because I had been a step 1 and a step 12 guy, and I happened to. I did the steps in between, but I blasted through all of them. And I thought it was all about carrying the message. And now I know that this process that we have today is for me, cultivating the expectancy of God's presence in my life. Not something that's transcendent and beyond me, although God is that, because it's a God of my misunderstanding. God is ineffable. It cannot be described truly, but God is also immanent. It's a very bewildering, paradoxical concept or conception to work with. That God is both transcendent and immanent, but God has to be accessible. And it's in the spiritual endings that we read at the beginning in the meeting. Most of us believe that the essence, the central point of the spiritual experience is the awareness, the consciousness of the presence of a power greater than ourselves. And for me, that's about the remembrance of God as often as possible. So as I'm leaving, ironically, the same clubhouse where the CD given to me at a year and a half sober, I am absolutely miserable on this night. And I haven't thought to put one of the CDs in. And this man comes on the CD, and he starts his talk with meetings that start with meditation. They bring me here. They bring me now. This is the only reality of my life. I've never been here in this moment with all of you on this call. That's what steps 10 and 11 did for me. And I look like the Maxell. You remember the old Maxell commercial where the guy's sitting on the couch, his hair's blown all the way back? That's me sitting there that night in my car. I'm a big book enthusiast at this point in my life. I've always been a big enthusiast, and I'm asking myself, what big book is this guy reading from? And he goes through the 10th and the 11th step in such a way that just it lit a flame inside of me that had been dormant up to that point. And then I put in this other CD. There's a guy named Chris who's got a patch over his eye, and talked about the spiritual malady. He talked about what it is that I was suffering from in the basement that night. That the program of Alcoholism is meant to treat this condition that dwells deep down inside of us. And once that condition is treated, my mind will no longer be the breeding ground to bring about the mental component of my illness, and I won't activate the physical part of my illness. And it hit me like a train. And so I set out to find some people that knew these 2 guys, and I did. And they brought me to step 11 in a way that I'd never been brought to it. And the first thing they asked me is, Tarek, what's going on with your meditation life? They didn't go straight to prayer. They said, "What's going on with your meditation life?" My sponsor at this point, I asked him about meditation because the first time I meditated, I put felt like 3 hours. I remember peeking out of my eye to see how many seconds had gone by. And so I called my sponsor at the time up and I asked him, and this is what I love about those men to this day. They imprinted on my soul. They imprinted on my heart. And they constantly were taking my heart and my mind to God. If it was a 10-step call, did you pray about it? If I didn't pray about it, I would hear a dial tone on the other end. The call would end. And some people might think that's a little harsh. I don't think I would do that today. But this is the way that I was instructed. And it's had an influence on me. And so Scott told me at the time, he said, "Tarek, I've got my own meditation practices, but what I encourage you to do is go find a Buddhist monastery and go ask the Buddhists about meditation. They've been doing it for 2,500 years. And what I absolutely adore and love about him doing that, he forced me to have my own experience with it. So I didn't just take what he was giving me. He asked me to go. And so this is one of my favorite stories to tell. So I'm still in my parents' basement at this point, and I'm walking my dog. And so for years, I grew up in the same house I grew up in, always on the 2-lane road. I know when I went to high school, I took a left and I drove about a quarter of a mile, and there was this long brick wall, and the brick wall had a Chinese writing on it, and it was the gates to a building that looked like some type of religious building. I thought it was just an Asian church for all these years. So I'm walking my dog one night, and I'm walking by the brick wall, and there's a banner hanging there. It was either the same day that I had the conversation with my sponsor about meditation, or it was a few days later. And there's a banner hanging from the wall that says free meditation classes. And so these serendipitous moments that we have in our lives, once we've decided that the spiritual foundation of life is our commitments and it's how we're going to live, they're no longer serendipity. What they are is the great reality. And my awareness is expanded just enough to see the face of God in that. And so I went to the monastery. It was a Buddhist monastery. They were Chinese Zen nuns at this monastery. And for the next 2 years, I would take the meditation classes they offered in the spring and the fall. And I would do the weekend meditation retreats. And so I discovered a relationship with meditation that deepened my relationship with my creator, that allowed me to access the depths of my spiritual heart. We hear this term, the spiritual heart. We hear the heart and we think we're drawn to this organ in our chest that does not only have a biological purpose for us, but it's the home of our emotions and our feelings and, our bliss. It can be the source of bliss, but what I learned from the Buddhists is that the heart is tapped through the unconscious mind. For years, I thought the unconscious mind was the place of compulsions, where they were driven, where we buried the narratives of our lives, the stories that we told ourselves that resulted in our conditioning and our programming. But what they told me is that it's also the home of the great reality. That space there when we're in meditation and the thoughts fall away temporarily and the vastness opens up. And I get the sense that there's something always with me that becomes more profound in those moments of stillness and vastness. I think we've all had those moments in meditation where it's such a powerful experience. Being the good alcoholics and addicts that we are, we try to recreate the experience, not understanding that it's a gift and a blessing to have those experiences. And that might be true, it might not be. It just happens to be my interpretation of it. What I began was a daily practice, a daily discipline of prayer and meditation, because it was preparing me. Ralph always talks about the spiritual gym. And, I can't go in the gym expecting to get some muscles and get ripped and get this ab if I'm walking into the gym with my Wendy's bag and I'm eating my French fries and I'm sitting on the side and I'm telling everybody over there how to lift those weights and how to run on that treadmill and do those squats. I'm not going to get, a workout sitting on the sideline. And I have to get in the game. I have to play. I can't be a spectator. And so thankfully for this God-given desire and passion I have for the spiritual foundation of life is I began the prep work, because the prep work prepared me for the events of 2014. And so the struggles that we go through in life are quite sacred in my opinion. There's a sacredness to the struggle because the struggle keeps me thirsty. And when it comes to my relationship with God and the spiritual way of life, I don't ever want to have my thirst quenched. And what keeps me thirsty is the things that I struggle with. Today, they're mostly around step 6 and 7. And what happened in 2014 is this man was taking me through the steps. His name is Bob O from Denver. And Bob asked me something about step 3. Bob said, Tarek, when you think of step 3, because step 3 has that amazing prayer in it, where we sacrifice our lives to abandon ourselves utterly to God. And he said, Tarek, when you think of God answering your prayers and God's will, what do you think about? And immediately I rattled off several positive events or circumstances or feelings or emotions. And Bob said, Tarek, what if you get a life-ending illness? Could that be God's will? I was married at the time and I had a stepdaughter. He said, what if your stepdaughter gets sick and she dies? Is that God's will? What if your parents are killed in a car accident tomorrow? Is that the will of God? And so he asked me to sit with this consideration. He asked me, Tarek, what are you willing to put on the altar to God? And so for the next several days, I sat with this uncomfortable consideration of looking at all events falling under the umbrella of God. I would limit God if I said God was only good. And so I took the third step, and then a series of events unfolded in my life. I got a kidney stone for the first time in my life. And then I hurt my back and they were trying to put me on pain pills and I refused to take the pain pills and my back was not in good condition. And I started putting on a lot of weight. I had a knee surgery. They said, Tarek, you're going to be on crutches for maybe 3 to 5 days. You'll be good to go. I come out of surgery and I have to be on crutches for 6 to 8 weeks. They found a lump on my throat, a mass. So I had to have surgery to have a mass removed from the vocal cord. And they found a bunch of polyps in my sinuses. So I had to have all these polyps cleared out. And then I also had to have 2 other surgeries. My house gets broken into. So now my ex-wife, my stepdaughter, and I have to move back to that basement. And my ex-wife's out of town on a girls' trip and our dog passes away. I have to put the dog down. All of these events that I'm describing. My stepdaughter began to have seizures. So we discovered she was. All of these events transpired between January of 2014 and September 2014. And I was one morning, I'm in my bathroom and I'm putting on one of my favorite shirts. And I'm too fat for the shirt. And so I Incredible Hulk and I rip the shirt off of me and I scream all these 4-letter words at my higher power, my creator. Why have you forsaken me? Well, I've done all this work for you. Why is this happening to me? And I remember walking out of the bathroom and dropping to my knees and I'm tears falling and saying, God, please help me. Please help me. The sincerity in that prayer, the connection of my heart to the prayer, and being blown away and fascinated with my only sanctuary and refuge in that moment was my relationship with God. But yet there was a part of me that believed that God was the source. God is everything, or else he's nothing. I'm a second step proposition guy. I've made my choice. God is everything. So then I have this bewildering conception to sit with. The very thing that I'm seeking refuge and sanctuary from is what I'm seeking sanctuary and refuge in. And that's been a theme for the sacredness of the struggle and it taking me closer to God. And so the events of 2014 would prepare me for what happened in 2017. In 2017, my marriage began to struggle because we were two ships passing in the night. And this man that I mentioned at the very beginning of my talk, at age 16, I decided to move him from my life. My brother and I had both become physically violent with my father in an attempt to protect my mother. And I could go on and tell you about the traumatic events growing up. And so I decided at 16, I wasn't going to have him in my life. And in my first fifth step, I was reading my resentments. He never went to a basketball game. He forgot my birthday. He physically abused my mom, my grandmother, my brother, myself. He was an embarrassment. I had to lie to all my friends because I didn't want to know what my father did for a living, et cetera, et cetera. And at every one of those resentments in that fifth step, the sponsor would say to me, Tarek, did you ever physically abuse someone that you loved? And I'd have to say yes. Did you ever forget someone's birthday that you loved? Yes. Did you ever not to an event where you were required to be there? Yes. Did you miss important events in friends and family's lives? Yes. And my head began to drop because I realized I'd become my father. And that bridge between the third to fourth column, the space between that compassion, the bridge of compassion, I went over the bridge, and heart and mind through that process were taking God and saying, I'm okay, God, that gave this man as my father. And I sought him out at 31 years old. I made amends to this man. And, I built a relationship with this man and I fell in love with him because he had drank everyone away at point. And I understood powerlessness and I understood what he had lived with. And so I began to build a life with this man. And in June of 2016, I find out he's got stage 3 liver cancer. And so I'm his primary caretaker at this point. And without the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, without a discipline around steps 10 and 11, I would not have the ability or the capacity to raise my heart and mind to this man. It is through those practices and through my relationship with God that I could have a relationship with my father, because he was the first version of God that I had in my life. Everything had come full circle. And this man was dying. And I was administering all the medication for him in the palliative care. And my ex-wife, in the middle of him dying, those last 2 weeks, asks me to move out of the house. And so where does my mind go? I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous in good standing. I think I'm a respected member in the community. Oh no, everyone's going to think I'm not practicing my principles at home. And that's why my relationship fell apart. What is everyone going to think? Blah, 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 blah. And so I have to vacate the premises and I end up living out of a bag and pretty much homeless. I don't have a place to call home for the next several weeks. And my friend Lindsay let me stay in her spare bedroom. And I'm sitting in the spare bedroom. I'm taking care of my father every other night. My mom and my stepdad are helping me take care of my dad. And how amazing is that? Because I recreated my life and grounded my ideals in a power greater than myself, I was in a position to have my stepdad help me take care of my father as he. Without the power of God in my life and without the program Alcoholics Anonymous, that would not have been possible. And I'm in my friend Lindsay's guest bedroom and I am curled up on the floor in the fetal position because my identity has fallen apart. I had the identity of a father, I had the identity of a husband, and now my circumstances are telling me that part of my personality does not exist anymore. So the protection of of father, of being the homemaker, of being a homeowner, a husband, it folded back on itself, and I was forced to live with my shadow. I was forced into a dark hole. And I remember sitting and curled up in the fetal position on the floor. And all I could do was, God, please keep me safe and protected. God, please keep me safe and protected. Simple prayers, but the level of sincerity. When we sincerely take such a position, all sorts of remarkable things will happen. And I called one of my spiritual mentors at the time, and I said to him, I said, Gerald, this is what's happening. And I described my prayer life to him. And he said, Tarek, that's beautiful. You're sitting in the middle of God's mercy. You will be safe and protected. And he said, how's the sincerity? And I said, it's off the charts. And he said, this is what we need in our life with God. Sincerity, the presence of the heart, the presence of the mind. And I can go on and on. I've got a few minutes left. I heard a man not too long ago say a few things that I have been sitting with ever since. And what he said was, prayer without the presence of the heart is invalid. And prayer without knowledge of why it is we're praying is invalid. And so what I want to do here in these last few minutes is describe a little bit of my practice to you, because the cultivating of God's expectancy in our life is what this whole thing is about. Everything is about God here. We have nothing else to offer you except a spiritual experience with the higher power of your understanding. That's all we have to offer the new people. And a friend said this at the beginning, but we want you to come all the way in and sit all the way down. Because through our stories, we may tap a part of your heart and open it up. And I'm starting to understand that for years, I was not a fan of keep coming back. But now we have to keep coming back because we don't know when the story is going to pierce the heart. We do not know when that's going to happen. And so these questions in the morning when I wake up and I get ready to do the practice, I have to ask myself these two questions. Do I know why I'm about to do the practices? Because what I don't want to have happen is these practices become like brushing my teeth. They're automatic, they're habitual, and they're sanitized. I need them alive. And so I don't care what comes up in my consciousness, but just the very act of asking the question grounds me into the discipline or the practice. And I do that for a minute and a half. And then I ask myself, is my heart present to what I'm about to do? Am I sincerely taking such a position to raise my heart and my mind to God? And then I say my prayers. And those are they're more gratitude these days, not a lot of supplication or asking for specific things. I read my books and I contemplate on what I'm reading. I'm not reading to memorize. I'm reading to see what memories are coming up in my consciousness, where the reading is landing in me. What am I able to access that I couldn't access before this reading? And then I meditate, and I meditate for no less than 15 minutes. And the Shifu at the Buddhist monastery, one of our first meditation classes, she brought a bucket, a clear construction bucket, and she put it on the floor. And we did our meditation. They always started with 40 minutes silent meditation, then a 10-minute walking meditation. When we came out of the silent meditation, that bucket was clear. All the dirt and the soot had settled to the bottom. And she said, this is the human mind. And every human being is different with how long it takes for your mind to open up like that. And that's why I don't meditate for less than 15 minutes. Today, I know that my spiritual bread is apportioned to me every single day. I don't need to try to make it bigger. It's not going to be less. I'm going to have everything that I need. There is one that is looking for me, and that one will find. One is death. And my life has to be about cleaning up the wreckage of me 8.5 years to clean up the wreckage in my past. So when I meet death, I don't experience anything but a degree of being ready to move on to whatever is next. And that has a tremendous amount to do with cleaning up the wreckage in my past. I have a debt to pay God, and I'm the only one that can pay that. The greatest gift that God gave me is my recovery. And what I do with my recovery, my gift to God. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name's Tarek.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Calvin. I'm an alcoholic. And Taryn, thank you so much, man, for a really strong message, man. And I could identify so strongly, that God comes through the wounds like you talked about. Through when things get rough, when things get tough, they talked about. I like when you talked about the meditation part, when you talked about the lady putting the bucket down in the meditation, and as it settled, all the stuff settles, just like your mind settles down as you keep doing it. I don't think there's no really wrong way to meditate like you talked about. I think the only wrong way to not meditate is not to do it, because it gets better as we keep doing it. We just got to keep on doing it. I'm finding out everything that I do in the spiritual realm has to do with my consistency. It's just not stopping. It's not going to be perfect, but it's just me not stopping. And I've been something has brought me to a whole nother place in my spiritual life, and just like yourself. It was just good to hear you, man. And, I like when you was just talking about how you had to take care of your parents and the things you had to do, and God put you in a position. He always gets us prepared to do the next thing. He always preparing us. Sometimes it don't feel good when they preparing us to do that thing, to take care of your parents and to do the things we do. But my God, that's what's happening. And you talked about it perfectly. And I'm just so grateful I could be here tonight. I'm so grateful to be a part of this meeting. Thank you. Thank you so much for asking me to share for them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Calvin. Josie, please unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Josie. I am an alcoholic, and thank you so much for your share. I found it very interesting. I remember when I was new, there was this lady that used to introduce herself, and she always said her name, and then she would say, "I'm grateful for the struggles." And tonight you reference the sacredness of the struggle, and I'm wondering if you can maybe expound on that just a little bit.
So much of what we experience around steps, prayer, and meditation is informed by our conception of God. And so I've met plenty of people over my time here that they don't look at sacredness. There's a part in our big book that says we relax and we take it easy, we don't struggle. And they focus on that part of the big book. What I've found is through the struggle that I experience in life, there's an aspect of my character that I'm struggling with, and that struggle in my character creates a friction. I call it a burning inside of me, and it sits me back down to the table with God, because Ralph always says this, that I'm defective and I have to return to the manufacturer. We get those instructions with our products. And as a result, it is my struggle, my brokenness that takes me back to God. If I were to look back over my almost 16 years and you were to ask me what periods in my recovery have deepened my experience with God, it'll never be a reference to some period of happy, joyous, and free. It'll always be a reference to something that's extremely dark that's going on in my life, a period in my life where the prayers just seem to evaporate off my tongue and the meditation doesn't produce anything, and I can't buy any more stuff to feed this emptiness inside of me. And I get to a place where there's only my relationship with God, and then I get drawn out of it. And so in looking at it that way, based on my conception of God, the sacredness is in the struggle. But I don't think that's the only way to look at it. It's just the way it speaks to my heart. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Josie. Ralph, please come on up.
My name's Ralph White, and I am an alcoholic. And Tarek, one of the most illuminating talks I have heard. I've been on this series. I want to thank you, Ali and Teresa, for having this particular series. And you guys have had some amazing talks. And Tarek, for you to talk about what this practice looks like in real time and in real life was really powerful, especially some of the perceptions of and conceptions of things that people normally think of, well, what is it, good or bad anyway? I love when you talked about the third step. Being as engaged in this 10 and 11 step practice, have a question. How are you still incorporating some of that practice in particular in family situations? Are you currently experiencing any situations that are still challenging you, financially, family-wise? Just interested in it if that's going on, and what's the process for that?
Absolutely. There are challenging events going on in my life as we speak. My partner and I, we have this beautiful 7-year-old, and my partner also has an 11-year-old boy who we haven't had live with us. He's been living with his grandparents his entire life, and the only father he's ever known was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in December and passed away a couple of weeks ago. And we've got this incredible little nucleus of a family, and now we're going to have this 11-year-old boy that we see once a month, but at some level, we don't know him like we know the other boy. And so we have to integrate him into our family. And so I had to see a real dark side of myself come up, the selfish part of myself that doesn't want to do that. And I have to acknowledge it, because the more I acknowledge that part of myself, the less likely I'm going to act out in it. And part of my 11th step is talking to Ralph, because Ralph and I will do a 10th step about this stuff. And through the conversation with Ralph, I come out with some clarity about what to communicate to God in my prayer life. But right now in this situation, it's simple. What side of the compassion do I want? I have to be compassionate for this young little boy. He just lost the only father he's ever known. To attempt to understand him. I don't need him to understand what I'm going through. And I have to be there to him in however I can. But it's not going to be about him following rules in order to respect me. I can't be there like that, but what I just said only happens in in dialogue. I get some clarity. Sometimes I'm so in something that I'm so disturbed that the only way for me to get undisturbed is to have the conversation and step in the prayer, but also the 10th step, as I'm like walking into a situation, God, please set aside everything I think I know about this so I can have an open mind and a new experience with it. And then I continue, when my awareness is drawn to it, just say these little prayers as I'm trying to communicate. And with all that being said, I'm going to egg on my face, and I'm going to be calling Ralph for some more 10 steps.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Ralph. Martina, please come up.
My name is Martina, grateful alcoholic. Shukran jazilan, Tarek. Thank you. My question is, sorry, I never shared in this meeting before. My question is, I got sober in the pandemic. Since the pandemic, like your spiritual life, meditation, how has that changed? Is there anything that you've incorporated permanently? Like since the pandemic, or like since the pandemic, how has your spirituality, meditation evolved? Thank you.
I have this personality within myself that has a desire to be a monk, to live a monastic life. And so the pandemic for me was somewhat of a retreat, to be honest. Yeah, it was something that I enjoyed because at some point through the discipline of 10 and 11, fall in love with ourselves, but not in a selfish way. We become okay to a deeper level. I still struggle with aspects of my creation that I don't like, but there's so much of me that I'm like, God, I'm okay that you created me this way. I mean, this is the only copy of this here that we're going to exist. And being alone, truly find out what we're working with when we're I mean, there's nothing more dark than ourselves if we haven't done the spiritual work to come out of that, in order to have not only darkness, but there's a light and a darkness that's happening. And so for me, the pandemics, I mean, it helped me deepen the practices and to connect with people that I had not normally connected with on a regular basis, because our illness is one of separation and the connection aspect. And so, you know, Ralph talked about this a lot. Like, I mean, there have been so many blessings out of the pandemic. Of course, there's been the catastrophe and the heartbreak, but everything in life is like that. It's a mixed bag. You know, everything's, and I'm a mixed bag as well. And I think the pandemic allowed me to tap into that at a deeper level.
Thank you so much. Pat, please come on up, unmute yourself.
Thanks, Phil. Pat Olson, alcoholic. Tarek, wow. Thank you so much, so much. Pretty powerful share there. And I just wanted to ask you, I think you said that Ralph said this, that, and I don't have the words exactly like you said it, but it was something to the effect of don't let the life that AA give you interfere with your AA life. And I just thought that was kind of fascinating. Can you talk about that a little bit? Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So I've been active taking people through the steps since I was 4 months sober, and there's a phenomenon that I've observed over the years is when we have a well-whooped ass and we show up here and people start asking us questions. Are you willing to abandon yourself utterly to God? Are you willing to live the spiritual basis of life or else? And all these things. And we say, yes, yes, yes. But our butts are on fire at that point. But then what ends up happening is through abstaining for some people, and then through doing some step work and being catapulted into a new way of living, we start to get stuff back. We start to get the money back, the relationships, we start getting status in society. And now we've never asked ourselves the question, is this truly about deepening our experience with a power greater than ourselves, or is it about something else? So what ends up happening is we start to work the steps backwards. We only sponsor people when it's inconvenient. So we totally forget Bill Wilson's line that we have to perfect and enlarge our spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others. Now we don't sacrifice anymore. We just do it when it's convenient. And then prayer and meditation, I got to get my life going in the morning. I got to hit the gym. I got to treat the body. I got to buy stuff for the body. I got to treat everything other than my broken internal condition. So I start to walk away from the very things that got me to where I was at, but I'm unaware of this. And then I'm not disclosing things in a 10-step to other people. I'm not asking God to remove anything when I see it in myself. I'm not turning my resolution to someone and being unable to practice the code of, and dollar to donut, we are stepping on people's toes and we're not even aware of it. And in my experience, the majority of people that get to that point have a lot of unfinished amends. And so the willingness in step 8 vanishes. And I mean, how can you be accountable to your character if that's what's happening? There's no intimate disclosure of what's going on in my life. I'm not taking inventory. I've completely taken the will back, and God is no longer everything, and I have the power. And we walk back through the steps because we've let the life AA gave us get in the way of our AA life. These things were the things ultimately after to begin with. And I'm not saying anything wrong with getting these things and having all these things. I'm got to be back here in almost death, and I have that debt to repay. And this is, I guess, a gift from God, a blessing that I look at it this way, but I've watched it over and over and over. Does that answer your question?
Beautifully, beautifully. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pat. Milagros, please unmute yourself. Hopefully I said that correctly.
Hi, I'm Milagros, alcoholic, and I don't share a lot, but a sister gave me this and my first time here. But thank you for your share, Tarek. You know, she just said my line, but I know what it means. And, you know, don't let AA get in the way of your AA life. And, you know, I got sober to find a life, right? And I got a lot of things back in my life, but I don't let it get in the way. I have to remember that my sobriety comes first. You know, I can get the boyfriend, the car, you know, I can get that all, you know, but that all can just be like an inch away from me right when, you know, I pick up that first drink. But my question was you said I've learned to do a lot more meditation. And like someone said, there's not a wrong way to do it, right? So I have different ways to do it. I can't sit still a lot, but a sister showed me, you know, she's like, even if you have to sit in your car and have a cigarette or whatever, you know, it's like you open up the book and you have a notebook. And that started helping me a lot. But you said that the heart is tapped to the unconscious mind. What does that mean to you?
So the spiritual heart being the unconscious mind that you're asking, what is the relationship with the two? So this is where my conception of God's going to inform that statement. Because of the spiritual path I walk outside of the steps, I don't talk a lot about it in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not the place to talk about it. We're taught that our unconscious mind holds the key to God, because that has an awareness in it. And when I say awareness, it's awareness with a capital A, or it's reality with a capital R that's always been peering into existence. It's the same awareness I had when I was 4 years old. It's constantly traveled with me. But what's happened is I've gained experiences over that time, and I've interacted with the environment, and these have imprinted on my psyche and hardwired into me. So when I'm in meditation and the thoughts are beginning to fall off, because they get the space between the thoughts gets bigger and bigger and bigger. At the beginning of meditation, you got a lot of thoughts stirring around, and eventually it's like a balloon filling up with air. One of the thoughts takes you on a ride, and it turns into a movie, and then it wakes up, and there's, oh, I'm meditating. But there's a vastness and a stillness inside the meditation. And what I've been taught is that stillness and that vastness, that awareness with a capital A, is what everybody has. It's peering into existence through everyone. Now, again, and this is sort of an outside issue, because it has to do with the things that I've practiced outside of the steps, with the steps, never instead of. I do everything around the line, and the religious people are right. And so for me to make a statement like that, I'd have to get way into something that's outside what's going on here. But there's something very interesting going on in that vastness and that stillness. There's something there with me, and it's on. But my mind starts moving so fast that I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that's all I'm going to say about it.
Yes,
Does
that was
help?
good. Thank you. Yes, thank you. That was good.
Thank you, Milagros. Lana, come on up.
Hi, everyone. Lana, grateful to be here. Tarek, thank you so much for your share, and everyone else. I have a question. I guess it's a couple parts. How often do you go through the steps? And as a result of going through the steps, do you feel like steps, what is the result in steps 10 and 11 as a result of going through the steps over and over again? If that's your practice. Thanks for letting me share.
Yeah, there are two schools of thought here, that some people go through the steps and they stay sober in 10, 11, and 12, and they maybe go back and write inventory, and that's fine. You know, the only morality we have in Alcoholics Anonymous, if what you're doing works, then you keep work, and then we try something else. For me, the men that carried the message to me, they gave themselves to the process 1 through on an annual basis. And it's not like I'm rehedging an old inventory, but I have to go back and look at current powerlessness. There are things in my life currently today that I have a lack of proportion and I lack the ability to think straight. That's the insanity, that's the powerlessness there. And there are areas in my life where I am experiencing the trouble, the bedevilments on page 52. So I take a snapshot of that. And then I investigate any current doubt I have about God. And I look at my current conception, and then I look at my decision in the step. Do I live in such a way today that backs up my decision in the 3rd step? And then inventory, and then steps. And then I have a clarity about it's truly today, the grosser handicaps are self-defeating beliefs that I have about myself or the people in the world or the world itself. It's what my character is struggling with, those self-defeating principles. And then I look at if I've created any harm since the last time I went through the steps. And now I've launched into the world of the spirit. I have a deeper understanding and I can be more effective because that's what the 10th step is about. And so I do that for a few reasons. I like the effect produced by it. It's an expression to my creator that I want more of God in my life. And I don't have all the answers. So it's a form of submission. And not everybody has to do it. It's not the right way. It's not the wrong way. It's just it's a process that spoke to my heart. And I've been here for almost 16 years and I've gone through the first 8 steps 15 times. I do it about once a year. Ralph jokes around with me. He says, I like homework. Maybe that's a true statement. I don't know. But I love the spiritual basis of life. And I have been taught by the men in my life how to have a love affair with God. And the 12 steps are God used the 12 steps to save my life. And so I'm going to use that process.
Thank you, Lana. Teresa, you had your hand up. Are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. I got in the car. Hi, Teresa, alcoholic. I have a question, but before that, okay, Ralph, of course, that is the most profound thing you heard because he done quoted you like 20 times, so you probably heard you. But anyway, I just had to say that. I love how Ralph was like, that's the most. I'm like, yeah. Okay, I just had to do that as a little sister. Okay, I have a question for you. You mentioned like a lot of times you find this conscious contact with God goes to another level in the darkest places, and I found that to be true too. I want to see if maybe you can mention 1 or 2 times, or one, that happened, like you were in that really dark place, and then what ended up happening when you came out, and what changed about your conscious contact with God. Thank you. Oh, and I had another question, and that was, which I love for us to discuss in this meeting, is what type of other books that you've read or different meditative practices that you learned throughout the years. Thank you. And thank you. Your share was great.
Thanks, Teresa. The darkest, the dark nights of the soul. I would have to say what I mentioned in my talk, 2014, when all those events took place. And I'll tell you, I had 5 surgeries in that period of time, and I got put on pain medication all 5 times. And something interesting happened, because in the big book it says that, although we stay away from alcohol or substances for a period of time, we act much like normal people. But once we introduce them into our system, something happens both bodily and mentally. I was in this dark place and I didn't understand why these things were happening to me, in conjunction with my stepdaughter having epilepsy and our house being burglarized and having to move in with my parents and then have all the dog dying, the kidney stone, all of these things happening in such a short period of time. I remember laying on the couch and the medication was creating an effect. And in the darkness of that moment, I realized that the medication was not addressing any restlessness or irritability or discontent. It was treating pain. And I realized, although I was extremely judgmental towards the God of my misunderstanding, I was still safe and protected, because I yelled upstairs and I told my ex-wife, I'm done with these pills, take them away. This happened 5 times in a period of frustration and anger towards my creator. In a dark moment, it was almost like it wasn't even a flimsy reed. It was 100 times more powerful. It was protecting me. It was a sense of being carried. And that alone has an impact on me. And it's one of those pieces of evidence that I need that this way of life is working for me. And then when my dad was passing away, my dad is dying, and I'm sitting by his bed, and I have my prayer beads, and I'm chanting at my father's bedside. My father was Muslim, so I'm playing the Quran in the background. It's being recited. And I've created this space for my father's transition. And I was witnessing my own struggle with my own mortality, right? And I remember talking to some of the men in my life about that, and how I'd gotten to this dark place where I was struggling with, like, you know, where I was in my life and what that moment was going to be like for me. And I would watch relatives come in, and they couldn't stand to be in the presence of death. They were constantly talking regrets, what they wished they had not done or what they wished they did do. And they would want to turn the news on. And then I would have to kindly wait for a moment where I could interject and take everything back to what it was. Because that experience for my father, no other human being knows what that's about. Only the person having the experience knows. But yet I was in this dark place, and all that was informing me in that moment was the practices I had learned through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, which tapped me into being curious about other disciplines outside of the 12 steps, were feeding into that moment. And so although it was a dark moment, it's like getting to this place where we know that our only sanctuary refuge from the difficulties in life are going to be within our relationship with our Creator. Those were moments that truly woke me up to that. And I'll never forget whispering into my dad's ear, "It's okay for you to go. It's okay for you." Because he and I had no unfinished business. We were clean. And he was holding on, and he was holding on. And my mom would tell me to tell him I'm going to take care of my brother, but I couldn't make the statement because my brother and I are estranged. I didn't want to make a promise that I couldn't keep. And now I find myself still estranged with my brother to this day. And like I would leave when he came, and when he came back, I would leave. That's what was going on. But eventually, there was this still voice inside that said, you should tell your father that you're going to take care of your brother. And when I said that to my father in his ear, he took his last breath and he transitioned. And there's not a darker time than death. Not only is it the death of a loved one, but it's the mortality within ourselves that we're confronted with. And the fact that I was using spiritual practices, the spiritual toolkit to address the problems, that to me deepens my experience with God moving forward from that point. Does that answer the question, Teresa?
She says yes.
I was giving thumbs up. Even though, did you mention some books?
No, here's some books.
Okay.
There's a wonderful book called The Taste of Hidden Things by Sarah Sviri, S-V-I-R-I, Sarah without an H. Spirituality of Imperfection is absolutely amazing. Awareness by Anthony DeMello. The Way to Love by Anthony DeMello. Conversations with God is a wonderful book. There is a book called Being Aware, and that one is by Rupert Spira, S-P-I-R-A. That book is about the awareness with a capital A that I mentioned. Freedom from the Known by J. Krishnamurti, Krishnamurti, K-R-I-S-H-N-A-M-U-R-T-I. Yeah, those are ones that stick out now. Of course, Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle is a great one. Thomas Merton, anything by Thomas Merton. Richard Rohr is another great one.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Tarek. Thank you for your deep shares. This ends the discussion part of our meeting. Thank you for allowing me to be of service. And I'll give it back to Kelvin.
Thank you, Philip, and Tarek. Thank you again, brother, for a beautiful Q&A. Sorry, give it back to Ali. On behalf of the Fellowship of the Spirit, the Step 11 Speaker Series, we'd like to extend a warm appreciation to Tarek once more for sharing his experience, strength, and hope with us tonight. We'd like to thank all those who helped put this meeting together, our readers, monitors, and all those who participated. We look forward to having you next week with us for another awesome speaker. Steve Lee is going to be here, who will be sharing his experience, strength, and hope. I got to get a topic from him. Before closing, I will read a portion of Step 11 in the Big Book, page 87, 88. As we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. We constantly remind ourselves we are no longer running the show, humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, "Thy will be done." We are then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. We become much more efficient. We do not tire so easily, for we are not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. It works, it really does. We alcoholics are undisciplined, so we let God discipline us in the simple way we have just outlined. But this is not all. There's action and more action. Faith without works is dead. Thank you for letting me be of service. And after a moment of silence and prayer for those still sick and suffering in and out of these rooms, please remain muted as my friend Pat O will close us out by reading the prayer of St. Francis.
Thank you, Ali. Pat, I'll follow. Lord, make me a channel of thy peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love, that where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness, that where there is discord, I may bring harmony, that where there is error, I may bring truth, that where there is doubt, I may bring faith, that where there is despair, I may bring hope, that where there are shadows, I may bring light, that where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved, for it is by self-forgetting that one finds. It is by forgiving that one is forgiven. And it is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. Amen. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Pat. Let's please give Tarek some love.
Woo! Thank you.
Thank you, Tarek.
Thank you, Tarek. Thank you, everybody. Great meeting.
Thank you.
No doubt, Taryn. Thanks, man.
Thank
Great
you.
meeting you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you, Tarek.